Hey, our halacha vav. Our halacha is a halacha that's a duplicate of halacha peizayin, same thing. Ksheira sheyokim and hatrefa. You had a kosher animal, a calf, that was nursing from a mother who was a trefa. And now you shechted the calf, and now you open up the calf, and inside you find milk. So the milk came from the mother who was a trefa. So what's the din of that milk? So chol hanimtza b'kevasa, milk that you find inside of its stomach, mother, you're allowed to eat that milk. That means even though we know that the milk came from a trefa, so had you squeezed that milk from the mother into a bucket, the milk would have been treif, because it would have been yotze from a trefa. But if it comes into the calf and then you shech it, you're allowed to eat it. And of course, if the calf was the trefa and it had nursed from a mother who was a kshera, then of course it's okay, because in that case, when the trefa ate from the kshera, it's even more pasha that milk is okay, because the mother's milk was kosher. Had the mother's milk gone into a container, it would have been kosher. So that's pasha, that's kosher. But if the kshera is uncle from the trefa, that's the chiddush. What's the reason? The reason is because the milk that's found in the keva is considered pirsha ba'alma. Pirsha is something we talked about in Halacha Gimel Daled, that certain things are considered to be just inedible and waste products, and if it's in the stomach, it's automatically considered to be pirsha. That's the first sheet in the Machal. V'yesh oishim b'chol tol hanimtza b'kevis kshera she'okim me'achef. And some hold that no, the milk that's in there, if it's tzolol, I'll talk to you about that in a second, what that means, it's clear, if it's fresh, okay, then some people hold that it's usher if the kshera is uncommon hatrefa. Because we have a machlokes here 2 days, whether the milk that comes in, when the kosher calf nurses from the mother who's a trefa, is the milk that's in that stomach mutter or usher.
In other cases, there was only kid a trefa?
That was the second case the Mechaber said. If the child is a trefa and it nursed from a mother who's a kosher, that's more kosher that's kosher.
What's kosher?
That the milk in his stomach.
The milk in the stomach of the trefa.
Right. Because the milk 10 minutes ago came from the mother, so that milk is more kosher than it's kosher. You could. There's a tzad that should be kosher also, but it's more kosher than that's kosher. But the other way around, that the child nursed from a mother who's a trefa, well then the milk that should be in it should be trefa. What?
Sounds like a steer.
Because. No. So the reason because the milk that comes from is considered pirsha. So that's more. Okay. So the Mechaber had 2 days.
That should be also by milk of the kshera.
What? Because we should consider that to be part of the child. We should say that maybe the milk that's in here should be considered part of the child, and maybe the child is a trefa. So it should be a yotze from the child. And now it's the child, it's a liquid inside the child's body. So now you should possibly consider it to be child. That's not the din. It's not like that. And it's not like that. It's kosher because it came from a kosher. A minute ago it was. It's a clear in the Gemara.
Even if it's part of the kid, it's kosher. That's pirsha.
Yeah. But that's you're already on the second stage. That can be pirsha. But okay, the Ramah says. Let me finish with the Ramah. I'll explain to you what's going on here. The Ramah says we're knowing that the second day that we consider it to be usher. The kshera shunkum and trefa is usher if it's tzol, if the milk is still fresh in the stomach, and we only matter it if it becomes starts to rot and spoil and coagulate, like you'll hear in a second. If you have a regular calf that you shech, you don't have to be concerned that the milk that's in its stomach, maybe it was yearning from a trefa. That's like too far-fetched. Maybe it nursed from a trefa animal. The Gemara talks about such a possibility that maybe you should be chayshish that the animal nursed from a trefa. Maybe it nursed from a horse. Okay, which would be trefa. As long as you don't know for sure that it did that, you don't have to be chayshish. Fine. Now, we're about to switch terms over here, just so you shouldn't get confused. He kept using the word keva to describe stomach, okay, but really in the Gemara, the word keva doesn't mean stomach. I mean, in this context, keva means the liquid that's inside of the stomach, okay? And the or hakeva is what we call the stomach, the actual physical flesh. It's called the Ar HaKeva. Okay, so until now we had used the word keva to describe stomach, which is really what it is. But now he's about to switch words, because he says, V'yesh oitzum chatchil l'hamid b'kevis trefa, shankim l'akshera. And there are those who hold it's usher to hamid from a kevis trefa. That means it's the milk, not the keva. The milk in the keva of a trefa that was yearning from a kshera. Why? I feel b'karish, even if it became coagulated, I mean, even if it's pirsha. Why? M'shamar sa'ayin, the nira ha'echel trefa. So it looks like you're eating a trefa. Because you shechted an animal, it was a trefa, and lo and behold, you're taking pieces out of it to eat, and you're making cheese out of it. that we don't use it because it looks like you're eating from a treif. But the evidence, but if he did, then it's okay, and it's mutter. Okay? But the evidence would be mutter. Okay, so, let me first, I'll get to biodiesel in a second. Okay? Let me first, to the what connection to biodiesel, which you can't believe. Okay. Anyway, so let me first explain to you what's going on here. There's three sheetas. There's a Mishnah and a Gemara that say exactly the opposite of each other. Okay, the Mishnah is in Chum Bav Kuf Tez Zayin Aleph, and the Mishnah says, Ksheirish Yankim and Hatrefa, the Mishnah says that the milk is usher. Okay, a kosher animal nursed from a mother who is a treifa. The Gemara says if you shech the animal and you open up the calf's stomach, the milk inside there is treifa because it came from a treifa. Why? The Mishnah says because it says it's konus b'me'el. It's like it's sitting in its stomach, which means to say is it's like it's like in a container. If you had milked the treifa mother into a bucket, it would have been usher. So you milked it into the child. It's just as usher. That's what the Mishnah says. The Gemara says. The Gemara at the very end is like an omen of Gemara. At the very end, the Gemara says hilchasa, a bunch of things, and the Gemara says it's mutter because it's Persia. Okay, so the Mishnah says it's usher, and the Gemara says it's mutter. Okay, so what's going on over here? The Gemara just like that. So there's three shittas had three ways to be miyash of this steer. The Rif holds that the Gemara changed its mind. Okay, the Gemara talks about kan kadim chazara, kan adam lacha chazara. The Gemara says that the Mishnah changed their mind about this din, and therefore held. Originally, the Mishnah held that if it's in the stomach, it's usher. Later, it held that as soon as it's into the stomach, it becomes pirsha and it's mutter. So, although the Rif actually brings the Mishnah, but the Mishnah is not halacha. We don't pass it like the Mishnah. The din is that the milk that comes, if you find milk inside milk from a treifa that's in a kosher animal stomach, it's fine. That's the Rif's shita. That was the first day we brought in the Mechaber. Okay. The Taisa says, no. The Mishnah and the Gemara don't disagree with each other. The Mishnah is talking about tzolul, and the Gemara is talking about karush. What does that mean? Milk that's tzolul, that's clear, that's fresh, that just came from the mother's stomach is not pirsha yet. So that when the Mishnah says you now drink that milk, it's because it's still tzolul, just came from the mother as is. It nursed 5 minutes ago, it's just as regular. That's usher. If it sat there for a while and it started to coagulate and turn to, start to spoil or rot or call it you want to, then it becomes pirsha and then it's mutter. It's
being starting to be digested or not? Is that what's
it's starting to change from what it was originally. Tzolul is like clear and regular, and courage like coagulating and hardening, maybe it's digesting and partially whatever it is. So that's when it becomes mutter. Okay, and that's the second day in the Mechaber, and that's what the Ramah says we pass like that day. And the third day is Rashi, who, and it's hard to say this, but everybody understands Rashi to mean that Rashi doesn't have that girish at the end of the Gemara. Those lines at the end of the Gemara that they the hilchah so that it's mutter, Rashi is completely not garish there. And according to Rashi, all milk inside of the stomach of the calf is mutter. Is usher. That day is not 14 in Shulchan, but that's what Rashi she did. That's completely usher.
How do you know that Rashi didn't have years later?
There's this really long Rashi over there, and from the context of what Rashi is talking about, a whole Shiloh of Maisa, he's talking about, he did this and then that, you can figure out that he didn't have that gears at the end. Okay? Rashi doesn't say, I don't have the gears at the end. But there's a very long Rashi about a case, a whole to-do, and from there you can figure out that Rashi didn't hold it. Okay. So our Mechaber brought the 2 days. First he brought the Rif saying that it's mutter no matter what, automatically. Then he brought Taisus who's saying it's only mutter after it starts to become karush, coagulated, mush, solidify. And the Ramah says we pass like that day. Okay. Now, in order to explain to you what our din sort of has to do with this thing, I have to digress for quite a few minutes here to explain to you what biodiesel is. Okay. And after I explain to you the whole what biodiesel is and how you make it, then you're going to hear the shiloh we have. Okay. To believe that we have a child biodiesel from this din. Go for it. Okay. Okay. When you take vegetable oil or animal fat, okay, we're going to see in a second that vegetable oil and animal fat are really basically the same thing. They're similar chemically. They're very similar. When you take those and you want to burn them, you could use them as a fuel. Okay, but in the car or in the truck, they're not going to work very well because, in the way they describe it, the molecules are too big, okay, and they need smaller molecules to work as a good fuel. Okay, why that is not so important to us. Okay, just believe us. Okay, that's just the din. That's the way they say it. It's got to be. You need a small molecule. Okay, so you can't just go to McDonald's and take the oil from the used oil that they have and use that to drive your car. Okay, it doesn't work very well. So you want to switch that oil or fat, okay, and we're going to use those words interchangeably, because for our purposes they're the same. You want to take corn oil or animal fat or any other oil or fat, and you can change it into something that we call biodiesel that you can use to power a car or a truck or an engine or anything else. Okay, now, how does that work? What do you have to do? Now, the first thing we need to know, to understand that is, there's a chemical, there's a definition of something called an alcohol. Okay, chemically, alcohol doesn't mean something, on a chemical perspective, doesn't mean something that makes you drunk. Okay, that's something that makes you drunk. Okay, alcohol is a description of a certain kind of a structure, of a certain structure of a molecule, and the structure is, it has carbons, a molecule that has carbons in it, and at one end, it has what we call hydroxyl group. Okay, a hydroxyl group means it has one of the carbons, instead of being attached to other things, is attached to an oxygen, and the oxygen is attached to a hydrogen. Okay, that's called the hydroxyl group. If you have, usually a carbon can attach to four things. So if one of the things that it's attached to on one end is an oxygen, and that oxygen is attached to a hydrogen, it's called the hydroxyl group, and this is called an alcohol. Now, the name of the alcohol depends on how many carbons there are. Okay, what you're seeing on the screen here, that's called methanol, or methyl alcohol, it's the same thing, methanol, which is one carbon. Meth means that there's one, so there's one carbon, and it has a hydroxyl group at the end, so one carbon with a hydroxyl group at the end, and of course the rest is filled in with hydrogens. That's what methanol looks like. Methanol is poisonous. Okay? That molecule called methanol, which actually is very crucial to what we're going to talk about, methanol is poisonous. Okay? If you, other carbons, this is the one that just has with one carbon. That's our methanol. Okay? It's poisonous. Okay? If you take with two carbons, it's called ethanol, that you've heard of ethanol. That's beverage alcohol. Okay? That's the same structure, but just that it has two carbons in the chain, and then the hydroxyl group afterwards. Okay? If you have three carbons, it's called propanol. And if you have four, it keeps on going. The four carbons is butanol, and then pentanol, and hexanol. It just keeps on going. Okay? And all of them are the same. The structure, it's called an alcohol because it has the same structure. It's a chain of carbons. There's hydrogens covering all the spots that it can, except for at one end, there's a hydroxyl group. There's an oxygen connected to the carbon, and that oxygen is connected to a hydrogen. Okay? This is what alcohols are. Okay. Now, that's part one. Next is, an oil or a fat molecule. This is what they look like. I don't know, it doesn't look very good. I'm missing something here. Oh, there we go. Okay. No.
It's all fat.
Okay. An oil or a fat has two parts to it. Okay. An oil or fat has, I forgot to tell you something before. Okay. Oil or fat has two parts to it. The first part is glycerol. Okay, now, glycerol is not exactly an alcohol, but it's very similar to an alcohol. Okay? If you look at it, okay, if I'll tell you the technical name for glycerol, or what we call glycerin, same thing, is the name of the formula, I should have put it on the screen, is 1,2,3-propantriol. Okay, propantriol. And the reason why it's called that is because the propane part of it refers to the fact that there are three carbons. Just like I showed you before, there are three carbons. And the triol means that there are three alcohol groups attached to it. Okay, you see that it looks very similar to a propanol, okay, but except over here, instead of carbon attached to having one hydroxyl group, there are three hydroxyl groups over here. Okay, there are three carbons, each one of them is attached to a hydroxyl group. Okay, that's glycerin. Okay, what you're looking for over there is glycerin, and it's very similar to propanol. Okay, but it's not exactly propanol. That's why it's called glycerol. Okay, or we call glycerin. Okay. So an oil or a fat is made of one glycerin molecule and three fatty acids. Okay, what did you say?
Three squiggly lines.
That's correct. The reason why they have those squiggly lines is because when chemists write these things, they don't write every little hydrogen that's on there. It's understood that every carbon's got hydrogens attached wherever it can. The only time they write something is when there's something attached to the carbon other than a hydrogen. Okay? It's so partial that there's hydrogen, they don't bother. And in these squiggly lines, they don't have to bother to tell you that every one of those points is a carbon. Okay? So that squiggly line, that's how many carbons there are, and everybody understands that this hydrogen is attached wherever they could fit. Okay? Because otherwise it's all just straight carbons. Okay, now I didn't tell you that at one end there's extra stuff there. I didn't put it on there. There's a double bonded oxygen I didn't put into my picture. A double bonded oxygen and oxygen connected to a hydrogen, that's called a carboxyl. Okay? It's not important to us what it is. For our purposes, the first part you need to understand. The second thing is not so important. That chain really has one end of it looks different than the rest of it. Okay, anyhow, so a fat or oil molecule is this. One glycerin, three fatty acids. That's what a fat is. So what's the difference between one And the next, how come olive oil doesn't act or taste anything like animal fat? Okay, how come fish oil and I don't know, canola oil got nothing to do with each other? They're completely different birds. Why are they so different? And the difference is which fatty acid you attach to it. Okay, I have on my paper here, I didn't put it on the screen, I'm sorry. On my paper here is the differences between olive oil, the fatty acid composition of olive oil, palm oil, and tallow. Okay, and because of the differences of what they have, what we see most strikingly is the different melting points. Okay, they melt at 70, 110, or 130 degrees. Well, that's all the difference in the world between whether it's a liquid at room temperature or solid at room temperature. Okay, so we, in our way of speaking, we call oil the things that are liquid at room temperature, and we call fat the things that are solid at room temperature, but the structure is the same. Okay, and the structure is like this, always a glycerin with 3 fatty acids. Depending on which fatty acid you have will depend on which oil.
How many?
What?
Which or how many?
No, which. Not which. It's always the same. But the question which fatty acids are in there. Yeah, but the question is which fatty acids are in there will give you different kinds of properties. This one has more stearic, and this one has more palmitic, and things like that will depend on the properties of the thing. Okay, now, this connection of a glycerin to a fatty acid is one, it's something called an ester. There are many things that are called ester, but this is for birth. Okay, I didn't think of that. Sorry, I didn't think of that. But it's a type of bond called an ester, and this making biodiesel is called, okay, here's a big word, okay, which my computer didn't like how I spelled it, transesterification. Okay, transesterification means is you switch around the esters. Okay, you change the esters from being one kind to a different kind. What does that mean is, this is what goes on. This is how you make, now you're about to find how you make biodiesel. When you think biodiesel, what you're trying to do is like this. You're going to take that molecule that I showed you beforehand, it's a glycerin connected to 3 fatty acids, and instead, you're going to make each fatty acid connected to only one thing. Instead of 3 fatty acids to 1 glycerin, that's a, so to speak, bigger molecule, you're going to have each fatty acid connected to 1 molecule. 1 molecule being 1 methanol. Okay, that's what you're going to connect it to. So what you do is like this. You start with, too slow for me, 1 glycerin attached to 3 fatty acids. Okay, that's an oil. And you put in 3 methanols. Okay, obviously you don't do 1 at a time, but 1 unit of that. 3 methanols. Okay, remember the methanol just has 1 carbon to it. Okay, and when you react them together, you get nothing. Oh my gosh, this is too slow. 3 methanols and 1 glycerin. What happens is the 3 fatty acids each they separate from the oil. Each one gets attached to 1 methanol. Each one gets up to 1 methanol. So the methanols and the fatty acids join together to become these 3 individual molecules. And then you're left over, the glycerin is a leftover at the end. Okay?
How do you get that now?
Oh, it's a reaction. Oh,
How does it find? Is that a scientific property?
Not my problem.
What's up in this?
Not our
Force of
problem.
attraction.
It's not solid.
It's not to get this. Okay, so this is
Force of attraction between molecules.
okay. So this is what we do. We start off like this. This is on the left side. You see oil. Okay, we start off with an oil. You hope that's a little bit look familiar to you. That's an oil. Okay, and it becomes 3 biodiesel molecules. We call them. Okay, that's what we call them over here. Then each one is the fancier name for it is called a methyl ester. Okay, so the methyl ester because the methanol is connected to the fatty acid. So it went from being oil to becoming 3 methyl esters, and what you're not seeing here is this glycerin left over. Okay, the glycerin got knocked out. Okay, originally we had oil and methanol, and we got left with the methyl esters and glycerin. Okay, that's what we got left with. So the more obvious question, the issue that we know about is that a byproduct of this is glycerin. Okay, a byproduct of this process is to make glycerin. So what happens is, the more biodiesel there is, the more trace glycerin is going to be. Usually, biodiesel starts with trace oils. Okay, usually it starts with animal fats or used oils that are trace. So as the biodiesel industry grows, there's more trace glycerin in the market. Because glycerin is a byproduct of this process. Okay, so
Don't they make it with corn?
you can make it with corn. They make
much more prevalent.
No, they use corn to make ethanol.
Right.
This is not ethanol. This is biodiesel.
Instead, but then ethanol.
From ethanol, you make ethanol. Yes, it has leftover, but this ethanol does not have glycerin leftover. I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm confused. I don't remember. But this biodiesel means they walk around to McDonald's picking up their old oil and turning it into this. And they're left over with glycerin. What do they do with it? So they were trying to make biodiesel, and that's what they were producing. They have this byproduct called glycerin. So they go to sell it to somebody else. Okay, glycerin just came out of McDonald's oil.
And that's the same properties as vegetable glycerin?
Glycerin is glycerin. Remember, chemical glycerin is glycerin. No, you can't. It looks like the molecule. You saw what the molecule looks like. It is what it is. It's nothing, They purify it, and they want to purify it to make sure it doesn't have any traces of the animal product left over.
No French fries.
But right, I understand that, but otherwise, glycerin is glycerin. Okay, so
Where do you get biodiesel? Who uses biodiesel? Where do you sell it? Where?
They collect it. McDonald's collects their...
where do you buy? Like, what kind of gas station can you buy it at?
How do you get it? Where is it in the industry?
No idea. No,
It's not available for any regular consumer.
That I don't know. So I don't know who's using it. So I don't know. Okay, but we have a different.
That's regular diesel.
What?
That's like regular diesel.
That comes from petroleum. That comes from petroleum. This is biodiesel. I mean, they created these methyl esters out of food instead of out of petroleum. Okay, so now, but we have a more subtle side to talk about, and that is like this. This reaction that I told you. I wonder if that's on the next screen. No. Yes. Okay, here is. This is the formula for making biodiesel. Okay. 1 oil and 3 methanols becomes 3 biodiesels and 1 glycerin. Okay, now what happens like this? Even though it sounds very scientific, and it is, and it's very mathematical, that you saw how we could break up 1 oil and 3 methanols and reconfigure them and they turn into 3 biodiesels and 1 glycerin. You could do that, and it works. You know what I mean? It's scientific, but in practice, it doesn't work so perfectly. It doesn't work as neatly and mathematically as it looks like on the screen. And therefore, they put in extra something, in this case, extra methanol, in order to make sure the whole thing reacts. In other words, they're putting in 2 starting materials, oil and methanol. Okay? They want to make sure they get as much biodiesel as they can, so they put in extra of one of them to make sure they get a full reaction. Okay? The methanol is cheaper, so they put in extra methanol to make sure they get as much biodiesel as possible. They don't want any leftovers behind. So if there's going to be anything left over...
They add more of the other stuff. Wouldn't that just...
Say it again?
Isn't... You'd have to have more methanol. There's no other choice.
Well, no, in other words, you have... In our formulation, we put in 3,000 methanols and 1,000 oils.
Right.
So 3,000 methanols and 1,000 units of oil. Okay, we could put in 3,100 methanols and 1,000 oils. We could put 1,100 oils and 3,000 methanols.
If you add more of the other
Oil.
of the oil, then there's more chance of the methanols not matching up with the fatty acid.
Sure.
But in both cases, if you have extra of something, somebody's not going to have a shidduch.
If you have more methanol, if you have more methanol, then
all the oil...
chance of all the oil reacting.
So that's what they do. They put in more methanol.
It's cheaper because it's a lot
Well,
cheaper.
no, if you do the other way around, if you do the other way,
Well, you don't have enough methanol. So
Right.
Sugar fail.
if you put in more oil, every single oil would have found a shidduch. Otherwise, maybe it wouldn't. If you put in just the right amount, maybe some oil is floating around that have no oil to catch
If you
up.
put more oil, that means that more oils might not find their shidduch.
Sure. Fine. Anyhow, so what they do is, they put in extra methanol into this reaction, and what happens is, what mine says, they put in. We'll just make up numbers. 3,100 methanols, 1,000 oils. They come out with their 3,000 biodiesel units, 1,000 glycerins, and 100 methanols floating around. Pachos Yosei, not exactly, but it'll be 90 or 110 or something, about 100 methanol. Glycerin mixed with methanol. So all the things that they want, the biodiesel gets filtered out its way, the glycerin goes its way, and the methanol gets recovered. Okay, the methanol gets taken back out of the reaction, and what do they do with it? They use it again for the next thing. Either for the next biodiesel is the easiest way to use it. Okay, but they can use it in anything else. Someone who's making this could be making anything else with it also. Okay, so he has this leftover. Oh my gosh, this is much too slow. Let's see what I was feeling like when I made this. So the leftover methanol is recovered and it's reused. Okay, so now that I've given you a whole spiel about biodiesel, okay, really a whole spiel on methanol. So now we have 3 shilas that we have about this methanol. Okay, the first is the methanol kosher? Is the methanol kosher?
This poison is methanol.
Right, is the methanol kosher? Second, maybe it's not kosher, but it's kosher enough for non-food items. And last is, let's say it's not kosher. What does it say to us about all kinds of methyl products? That if you look at our database, they're all group 1. They get group 1s all over the place with things with methanol. Not every one, but that's basically because things like that tend to be group 1. They tend to be petroleum-based. But we just found out that methanol, which is usually petroleum-based, all of a sudden just came in contact with hot tallow. They just took biodiesel and made hot tallow to make our methanol that we think is so pure and just petroleum-based, there's no Kashrus issues to it. All of a sudden we just found out that there are people using methanol that just came in contact with fish.
It should be a good one.
Right, so the Shayla is, third is, forget about within the plant itself, what does that say about the whole industry?
He has a good point. It's poisonous and it's fun.
Okay, so
the chemicals.
So that's what we do. So we're coming, and now you're finding out why on earth we're talking about this today. Okay, what has to do with our thing?
What are the percentage of this methanol in the larger methanol?
In the world?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's true. Well, I'll talk to you about that in a second. This methanol, I don't think anybody who does this is going to sell to his neighbors. But Chaz, what is he doing internally with it? He may make something else with his methanol. Okay, it's not a tremendous amount. No, it's not a tremendous amount. Okay, so now the following way to deal with this comes from the OU. Rabbi Avi Jervo and Rabbi Gabriel Price together worked on this, and they said like this. Our din talked about a Kashrus Yonkim and a Trefa, and there was a Shaila, at some point the milk becomes mutter. Right? At some point, either or instantly, or after it sits in the stomach for a while, the milk becomes mutter. Okay. In Siman Pei Zayin, when this thing is talked about, the Beis Yosef brings a different Shaila about the same issue. The Kashrus Yonkim and a Trefa, and the milk is mutter, either instantly or after a certain amount of time it becomes mutter. What happens if that milk sat in the keva for 24 hours? So now, we're not the cave. It's not nuchigs anymore, and it's not treif anymore. But maybe it should be fleishiks. Maybe it should be fleishiks because it was kosher in the stomach of a kosher animal. The animal was kosher. It was a Kashrus Yonkim and a trefa, so the calf is kosher, and in the calf was, let's say, like an apple juice sitting in the stomach. Well, after 24 hours, it would be kosher, and the apple juice would be fleishiks. So should we say that if the milk sits there for 24 hours, now the milk, forget about it being treif and it being milchigs, now it should be fleishiks? I mean, who on earth cares? You care is, because this is used to make cheese. Okay, this liquid that's in the stomach, that's rennet. You use this to make cheese out of it. So if it sat there for 24 hours, maybe now you're not allowed to use it to make cheese, because maybe it's fleishiks now. So, the Beis Yosef has 2 days about this. The Beis Yosef has 2 days about this. One, I'm not going to make about whether this is mutter. Okay, you would have guessed that, right? Okay, so, and there's 2 ways to be masber what the mekilim hold. Why should you be mekel? Okay, it's too late for me to give you all the gory details, but the long and short is, okay, I'll say in short, without giving you both trapped in the coolers, the short version is that the mekilim hold that since the milk is mutter, it's pirsha. A good tam of fleishiks that's coming out of the keva, being absorbed into this pirsha, takes on the identity of the pirsha, and it also becomes mutter. Okay? Just like the milk itself has spoiled to the point that it's pirsha, so too the meat tam that's being absorbed into it also has that status, and it's also pirsha. Okay, it also gets the status of pirsha. Okay, really, the Beis Yosef of the Tashma. I can't hear you. It's a good question. We talked about that in Halacha Gimel. It seems to be like it's a new thing. It's its own, but
How can it not be a new thing? It's coming out of a treif animal. You say it's mutter. What's the nice time of that? It's but that's not nice enough. Double puggle and nice time of that. Double puggle and royal achila is on the same nice time.
No, it's worse. That's a puggle.
Right.
Yeah, but it's
not a lot of puggle. It's even. You want to say this is not royal achila?
If we know that it relates. That was Halacha Gimel. We were a little confused there, but it relates to being not royal achila. Okay, so the short verse is the mekilim hold that the meat tam that gets into it takes on that status also. Okay, so now that's what the mekilim hold. In which case, if that would be true, then this stuff would be mutter also, because we have tallow, fleishiks, treif, okay, together with the methanol, which is poisonous. So we would say the tam that it takes on that same status as the methanol.
Who's this poisonous and potent is the same thing?
Oh, I forgot to tell you that. I'm sorry. I forgot to tell you that. That's a good question. The pashto, it's over here. It's right over here. And that is, how do we know that things that are not royal achila are mutter? Right, like Ger Shem B'Shroch, it's in the end of Al-Chalot. She gave it to a Ger. So I asked Rabbi Shachter, I said, tell me, let's say there's something that if I give it to the Ger, he won't eat it not because it tastes bad, but he won't eat it because it's poisonous, because he's intelligent to know that he shouldn't eat that food. Okay? So he didn't have a riot, but he thought that was considered not royal Ger either. He held that was not considered royal achil either. Okay?
Pasha?
He held it was not royal achil.
It's delicious, but it's poisonous.
Right, that was the
I don't
shayla.
know why he'll eat it, because he'll give up, he'll eat it. I tomorrow, that's something. How come Shasi give up?
He's not right like him. He's a regular person.
Poison can be argued to be like.
Let it have a thing that he could eat it, and that's in his medicine. He knows to have medicine. What do you call it? That thing is forgiven. And cure it, right? He could have things,
Okay. So,
Does it poison? Then he has the medicine. He knows it's
Poison antidote.
antidote.
No one would do that. It's too scary. It's fun.
okay. So, but the problem with the okay, the problem I'm telling you, the problem is, wait a second, I told you there's 2 days in the Beis Yosef. Beis Yosef has 2 days, and the Beis Yosef, the Shulchan Aruch and the Rama Paskin, that you should be machmir l'chafila. Okay, it's only mutter b'diavad if you did this kind of a thing. That to use that milk to make cheese, and the milk that was pirsha that now became fleishigs because it was covered, you can only use that b'diavad. L'chafila you can't use it. Okay, so in our questions, this stuff we would say l'chafila we would not use this methanol product to make a kosher product. Okay, to make a kosher food product because we would say, look at that din over there. It says when the good tam gets mixed into this. Not royal achila, at least in the case of the pirsha case. In the case of the milk, it said not to use l'chachila. You could argue that this is better than that, but they said, no, we shouldn't use this l'chachila. But,
He's giving us that. The methanol itself is poisonous.
yes.
What is the towel? What do you think makes the towel?
No,
the one down at the methanol is okay.
The methanol now just got in a tam of tallow into it. The methanol would be kosher. The problem is that the methanol was reacted together with the tallow. That's our problem. The methanol itself was fine. Methanol came from petroleum, but we just reacted in making the biodiesel. It was cooking together with the tallow.
Okay, so you want to say
So is there tam of tallow in the methanol now?
The methanol is not any worse than the methanol.
You think? So I'm saying if you look at the din over there when the chalav shefa that's in the kshera and it was covered in fleishigs. It's a machlokes whether that is it now fleishigs or is it not fleishigs? We have we say it is fleishigs, even though it's going to something that's pirsha. But it had coverage of a tam of fleishigs into it. So we say, it has a tam of fleishigs. He said, but it's pirsha. I don't care, but it has a tam of fleishigs in it. So it's pirsha with a tam of fleishigs, so it's considered as fleishigs. So I'm comparing that to here, where we're saying is it's methanol with a tam of tallow in it. So the Shulchan said over there, l'chachila not to use it.
You know what the sound is problem?
Yeah. And so is the milk inside of the cow's stomach. Not royal achila, it's also pirsha. It's also royal achila.
Why is it machmir l'chafila? Something better, the food is spoiled. So what's making a difference with fleishigs and other? What's the challenge?
So no, it's not. You're asking if it's pogum, it'll be next time we've got. So you're saying, okay, let me see. You're saying this over there. It's just pure. So it's a din that we're allowed to eat it. So then, if it has a tam that's also in it, so it should ask the food also. But over here, it's not royal achila at all. Okay, that's a good point. So you want to say it's better than that case?
Yeah,
it's even better than that case. In that case, it was in din, not considered royal achila. Okay, I'm not sure that's correct. I'm not sure it's correct because, for example, lafit toises, it becomes pirsha when it becomes karush. Okay, so I guess it really depends on something that we're still not sure about. Does everything that's pirsha mean that it's really not royal achila, or does it mean something else? Is there some magical thing that's happening to it? The Kashrus is that pirsha means that it was not royal achila. So
If you go with Halacha that something just poisonous is problem, you don't need any rights.
because
The whole thing is problem. If something is not royal achila, and you put some tam in there, it's still going to be not royal achila.
so you think it's going to stay just as not royal achila?
Yeah, I don't get the whole
So why is it worse than the whole thing is double straight? You're saying it's not a straight. You say that it's poisonous, it's mutter.
Right. It's not royal achila.
Well, I hear something kosher, I put a straight time to it.
Okay, so you tell me. So why by the case over there? Why by the case by the milk?
Because milk is not considered mamish any royal achila.
Because it's not as bad. You're saying it's pirsha, so it's on its way, or it's something wrong with it, but it's not as bad as this kind of which is really off the chart. Okay, that's fine. I can accept that. Okay, so I don't have to say what I was going to say. That's fine. I can accept that. I was going to say. I'll say it anyhow because no. It's trying to get to this part. So get to what just for the understanding of it, which is when you make something for non-food use. No, it's not. It has nothing to do with this. It has to do with hashgacha. When we're making some hashgacha for non-food use, okay, the rules are very different than what has to be kosher for, so to speak, food use. And for non-food use, it just has to not have any trace ingredients mixed in. Okay, so it doesn't have to be kosher or mahadran. It doesn't have to have not blias. We don't care about blias and kalim. All we care about is that there's no be'en in there, because the people who are buying things that are non-food and they're looking for hashgacha, that's what they care about. Okay? They care that there should be no pieces of animal fat floating through it. So for these purposes, this has been purified. There's no animal fat in this thing. The methanol has no animal fat in it.
It's more than pleas, though.
It was cooked together with it and then it was purified afterwards.
Purification is not a hechsher. Not a kashrus.
It doesn't do with hechsher. It has to do with.
They don't want any pieces. They're not going to have it.
Okay, so that's what.
It's much worse than kale.
Yeah. So I have to tell you.
And where does it come from?
I thought actually about talking about that. I realized we were going to have time. That whole parsha about things that are non-foods and how we give hashgacha was its own funny parsha. Oh yeah, well, we couldn't have done it with that much. That's true. But it's its own parsha. But this would have passed for a non-food item. Something like this would pass a lot worse than this passes for kosher as not food. What can I tell you? But anyway, okay, let's see it.